Thank you, thank you. See, I'm going to use this microphone if that's okay. Thank you, Paolo, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here on a beautiful, albeit a little bit chilly, Thursday evening here to basically talk about ideas, right? That's what we're here to do. We're here to talk about ideas related to media and technology. Two subjects that, as you'll see tonight, are very intertwined with my career and really a lot of our lives in the last 25 years. So I also just want to say what a tremendous honor it is to be the Atwood Chair for the 2024-25 academic year. You know, 22 years ago this month, I think, I got my first job in media as a studio camera operator at KTUU. I had just moved to Alaska, and that was my first job, my entry point into media here. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. But to think that 22 years later I'm standing here, supported by the Atwood Foundation, supported by UAA, is pretty mind-blowing, and it's quite an honor for me, and I'm going to do the best I can to be a good steward of that role while I'm in it, following in the footsteps of many great Atwood chairs there as well. So, and as Paolo mentioned, I was a graduate in 2010 of UAA. My wife, Victoria, who's here, as well as a graduate of UAA and a longtime employee, and so green and gold is a common color combination in our house, and we're proud UAA supporters. So it looks like we have a good mix of folks here. I know we have folks online as well, and we're recording this talk for those who couldn't be here today to see this a little bit later on. So, but today's topic is making stories that matter in the age of artificial intelligence. And I love this topic because it really gets right into the heart of content creation, right into the heart of storytelling, technology, and even a little bit of entrepreneurship there, all of which have been instrumental to my career, which is 20 plus years now, working in media. It's really a fundamental question of how do we make content, how do we tell stories that matter when the tools and the landscape continually shift and change. We all know we're kind of on the front part of this this artificial intelligence wave. So how do we make sense of these changes? How do we find opportunities? How do we manage meaningful careers amid this sort of changing and rapidly, accelerating innovation that's happening? And so we'll get into a lot of that here, especially, I think in particular for students and young folks. How do you think about the next 25 years of really your career in media and beyond? So we'll talk about all of that here. I've got about 45, 50 minutes to talk with you today, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers questions at the end, and so be thinking of that as well. So as I mentioned, I'll share a little bit about who I am. I really kind of want to walk through aspects of my career through the lens of the changing technologies at the time. As sort of an introduction of me as the Atwood Chair, this is my first opportunity to really share about who I am in this role and what brought me to this role. So I'll share a little bit about myself and my career, some examples of work as well. We'll talk, of course, about the essential value of storytelling, people-driven storytelling in particular. We'll talk about media and technology, artificial intelligence, of course, and we'll talk about sort of, what that means for storytelling as we go forward. But, so a little bit about me. I've wanted to tell stories for as long as I can remember, visual stories. I'm most comfortable doing this, running around with a camera in my hand, and that's frequently what you'll see me doing. But I've really wanted to just do this for as long as I can remember, and I started thinking about how do I turn 20 plus years of experience and interest in this into teachable lessons in this role of Atwood Chair. But what really jumped out at me as I thought back about my career is how at every step technology created more opportunities for me, right? We'll start back here shortly about 25 years ago and look at the differences between technology and now. Really, the last 25 years have probably been the most rapid period of technological innovation for communications, potentially in human history, if I can be bold enough to say that, right? A lot has happened in 25 years. So we'll talk about that. And I think, we'll walk through periods of my career according to the prevailing technology at the time. But the big takeaway for me in thinking back about this was at every turn, technology created more, not less, opportunity. And I think that's cause for optimism as we step into artificial intelligence and look about what that can do for media and communications as we go forward. So I want to go way back into the late 90s, and much to my own potential embarrassment, I want to share a piece, the very first story I've ever created with a camera. And now back then, in the late 90s, if you remember, access to creator tools, cameras, was not readily available, right? We didn't have 4K phones in our pocket. So that was the problem for me. I wanted to do these things, but I didn't have access to the tools. My dad, who, when you say Professor Hillwig, that's who I think of, because he taught communications at various colleges, primarily Eastern Kentucky State while we lived there. But he brought a VHS camcorder home on a few occasions. This is the camera that they would teach students with at school. And he brought these home for me to play around with over maybe a long weekend or a week, spring break or something like that. And this was my first exposure to having a camera. So I want to play the first few seconds of this. I've kind of recut a little montage of it for us here, just mostly so I don't inflict this entire thing on you. But you'll get a sense that it'll roll for a few minutes or a minute or so, and then I'll talk over a little bit of it here. This might be the world premiere, by the way, of this particular piece.
Hello and welcome to this evening's edition of Interview Tonight. I'll be your host, Bob McCrae. Tonight we have a very special guest with us, the unlikely superstar known only as Lawn Boy. Certainly, Bob, I am glad to be here, and I would like to thank you for extending upon myself that very warm introduction. It is nice to feel welcome. Okay, Lawn Boy, let's get right
Okay,
into it.
I'll talk over this little last montage here. You get the idea, and I hope that my colleagues at UA aren't questioning their choice of Atwood chair now. But rest assured, if you like to play with cameras, you too could be Atwood chair one day. So essentially, Lawn Boy is the story of a rock star lawn and landscaper who falls on hard times after a challenger comes around to take some of his glory and attention away. And then he hits even further rock bottom when his beloved butler, Albert, tragically dies by choking on a cracker. Thankfully, my one and only death scene on camera ever. And then this inspires him essentially to rise back from the depth of rock bottom and reclaim his glory once again on the lawnmower. So this played out in what the final edit, probably a 15 to 20 minute piece, so I have spared you greatly here. But I share this because without even knowing anything about storytelling, I had created essentially the hero's journey, right? The story of someone who's on top, falls to the bottom, and rises back for various reasons through redemption. So we know a lot more about stories and storytelling than we know. It's just organic to us, right? This is just part of who we are. I share this too because stories are multidimensional, right? That was just a silly piece that I created mostly in my parents' basement with a borrowed camera. But I watch it now, and to me, it shares a time and a place. It's a source of joy and happiness for me and my family. And in a sense, it shows a person trying to find out who they are in front of the camera, and thankfully landed on staying behind the camera. But stories do that. Just a small personal story like this does that for me. But as we'll talk about, stories at a large scale do that for many people, right? They mean different things at different times. They touch you in different ways. They bring back sensory memories to a time and place. So stories are multidimensional, and even just that rudimentary piece back then, shows just the beginning of what the conversation we're going to have on what storytelling and ultimately technology can be. Of course, as I go through this, I want to ground us in technology at every step of the way. VHS was prominent at the time. Most of you may know VHS, the big unwieldy tapes you have to put in a camera, and I didn't even have a conventional way to edit this. I think I linked it up to a VHS deck and edited between the camera and the deck. So the common creator tools that we take for granted today just were not available at the time. So, and I say this was just 25 years ago. We think about that in terms of the way things are today. I moved on without access, thankfully gave up that lawn and landscape career, and I moved on without access to cameras. My form of storytelling became writing. I went to school and I got an English degree. Just no access really to video cameras at the time myself. So I really focused on writing, and writing became one of the most sort of enduring skills that's carried with me throughout my career. I moved to Alaska, as I mentioned, in 2002. My first job was as a studio camera operator at KTUU. Some of you may remember this old set here on Tudor Road. Studio camera operator is just what it sounds like. You're pointing the camera at the anchor, you're turning it to the other anchor when you're told to, you're moving it back to the other anchor. Very, very prescriptive way of doing camera, but in my mind, this entire machine of KTUU flowed right through me, and I thought that was amazing. I got to be the person who helped put this product on air. More importantly, perhaps, I got to stand in the studio every day and watch a tremendous amount of content. Got to watch every story of every newscast and watch how news photographers were editing their stories, how reporters were telling their stories, and I studied every aspect of it for the amount of time that I was in that job. Ultimately, I started seeing these guys and gals going out into the field with cameras, and I decided I want to be doing that. I want to be a news photographer. And so for the next 5-6 years, I traveled around the state, all around the community with a camera, just every day telling the stories that you saw on the news. And there's really no better way to learn the craft of storytelling than doing this, just practicing shooting and editing every single day, and in real time getting feedback from some phenomenal mentors along the way. So this was what I spent, my work doing, was just dedicating myself to the craft of storytelling and through being a journalist at KTUU. So I'll share just one story here, a 2-minute story. Again, this was just a general news story shot in about 90 minutes and edited probably in about the same amount of time. So we'll just share this very quick 2-minute story.
I thought it was going to be a lot colder.
The signs of an Alaska autumn dust the mountaintops. They litter the ground. Seasonal visitors make one last pit stop, and there's a bunny in Midtown.
Hello.
Check that out.
I'm in a bikini in Alaska.
In 35-degree temperatures, Playboy's 2002 Miss July, Lauren Anderson, has a close encounter with Alaska's 2005 October.
All right, I'm thawed out. Boots were an awesome idea.
Anderson was brought here by PETA to take the fight to Kentucky Fried Chicken and farmers who supply the fast food chain with more than 850 million birds a year.
KFC tortures the chickens and they treat them inhumanely, and we're not asking them to not buy the chickens, we're just asking them to treat them in a humane fashion. It's not that much to ask for.
PETA and Anderson want people to boycott the Colonel until KFC execs commit to better living conditions for their birds.
Yeah, get up there.
But in a state like Alaska, did the daring display work?
Okay, guys, look this way.
I think it's getting a lot of people's attention, just how she's dressed.
And the bikini gets people to look.
Attention from passers-by
I get a lot of attention.
and the media. But did Anderson change any minds about KFC chicken today?
No. No way. None. They're gonna, because they just did sex. They don't see anything else.
These men were on their way to Arby's when they spotted the yellow bikini.
Yeah, I was, till I seen what was going on here, and I flipped a Yui real quick and had to come check it out.
They left with chicken, but Anderson seemed unfazed.
It's really cold out here and I'm in a bikini, and that's going to draw attention, and that's what I want. Thanks for honking.
She looks like a pretty good protester to me.
But even as people disagreed with her philosophy, they admired
Look at
her
me.
dedication.
Look at me, how smart I am. I'm in a bikini in Alaska.
All right, so again, quick general news story. That was almost 20 years ago, right? That's on Northern Lights, where that KFC doesn't even exist there anymore. But again, kind of a story with a lot of, seems like a simple story, but a lot of building blocks of story, right? There's characters in there. There's even a little bit of conflict, right? Two opposing sides. There's a sense of place. There's humor. There's all the building blocks of story there. Again, just in a quick general news story. So this is where I was learning the craft of storytelling. There's you just sort of fly on the wall. We step back and we observe other media interviewing her, just sort of learning how to be observational as a storyteller during this time period here. Again, checking in with technology. Sony Betacam and Digibeta were prominent at that time. These are tape-based analog cameras. We were still editing tape deck to tape deck at this point, I believe, although we were beginning to talk and think about nonlinear editing. Digital workflows were not yet available or common in newsrooms at the time. So we're inching forward. We've, far past the consumer days of VHS, but still largely in analog format. 2005, the first iPhone hadn't even come out yet at that point. So I continued on in my career. I left KTUU. I went back to UAA and got a graduate degree in business. I didn't think I was going to come back to a TV station necessarily. I was potentially thinking my career with a camera might be over at that point after I was studying business. But I had the opportunity to come back to KTUU as a director of marketing, and in a role that really allowed me to be a brand manager for KTUU, to take what I knew about the station, what I knew about the journalistic side of things, and to combine it with this sort of promotional end of things, marketing, communications, a different discipline and a different set of skills. So to illustrate a little bit of the different styles that we had, and this coincided with the really digital workflows coming online, and we're able to do work that looked and felt entirely different. So I'll just play one 60-second piece that shows, when you contrast it with the production style you just saw to this style, you'll see quite a difference here.
Okay, here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
When it comes to news today, it's not a question of what you're seeing, but who you're getting it from. And when you turn the camera around, you want to find a team that lives to fulfill its promise. A team that deconstructs the headlines and toils to find the heart of the story. A team that drills into every fact and goes toward it, whatever it might be, just to cut a clear path to the truth. You want a news source that hustles and struggles and fights, not only to report, but to listen and know a community as well as it knows itself. You want a news team that understands real news simply means trust. A team that knows the information you need.
Breaking news coming into the channel.
Is only as reliable as the people who deliver it.
Good show, everyone. Nice job.
Channel 2 News, Alaska's news source, your news source.
So quite different. Now we're starting to embrace new tools, right? Technology is enabling us to do some different things with production at this point. We're using gimbal-based cameras. There's a couple of drone shots in there that's starting to emerge. Everything is now non-linear workflow, which just makes things much quicker and more seamless. We're using motion graphics, and there's even some compositing of shots in there in a couple of spots. So this digital workflow has just enabled us to be so much more dynamic with a lot of the work that we did versus some of that analog workflow that we had used just a few years earlier. And so, that's technology sort of unlocking new opportunities for us in real time. And it coincided with a time period where I was really trying to merge these journalistic background with some of these new production styles. And we had the opportunity to do some really unprecedented work at KTUU while I was in the role of creative services director there. We had owners who saw the world looking at Alaska through various shows and forms of media and said, why don't you all take your knowledge of Alaska and go out and find shows, develop shows and put them on networks? It sounds very easy to do. It's not that easy to do. But we did have some success. We developed a lot of shows, a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas, and I was working closely with our general manager, Andy McLeod, at the time. We had an hour-long show on the Iron Dog snowmobile race that we produced and directed, and that was on NBC Sports Network. We developed and co-produced an 8-part docuseries on the NFL network on the Barrow High School football team called Football Town Barrow, Alaska in Utqiagvik. Again, these are unprecedented things for a local TV station to be doing, but we had Alaska, we had the uniqueness of Alaska, we began to form some relationships, and for me, it was this sort of light bulb moment for how we combine that journalistic style, storytelling style with the emerging technologies to create new models and formats of storytelling. These were already happening at the time, but they were new to me and new to my sort of merging skill set there. And so we did that. That was wildly successful, and we had many more concepts that didn't make it, but it was a real light bulb moment for me in my kind of career there as I continued to lean into the technological advancements that could help broaden visual storytelling. As Paolo mentioned, in 2021, I started Greatland Studios. At the time, I was working full-time at Cook Inlet Tribal Council as Senior Director of Communications, where I really exercised a different communications muscle, right? It was a lot more writing intensive, learning a cultural organization, and managing strategic communications. And we were just emerging kind of from COVID at that time. And so the creative itch for me to get a camera in my hands was there. And so I created Greatland Studios with no business plan, no profit motive, no real idea other than to make a bucket for a certain type of work to go into. And at this point, as we're talking about technology, the cost has come way down for great cameras. You could get a mirrorless DSLR that shot HD footage for very cheap. And my philosophy has always been, whatever technology I have in my hands, I'm going to use it as if it's, the same thing the pros are using. I'm not going to let that be a limiting factor for me. So I went out and I decided, let's just see if there are people doing interesting things, and I'll ask if I can do little documentaries on them, little mini docs. And so 2021, 2022, I just went out and I started doing that. And I just wanted to tell authentic stories, people-driven stories. And so I'll just share just a quick demo reel for some of that early work, really the first year or two of that, and sort of, then we'll segue into what that kind of turned into. Tell me what the purpose of life is.
Oh, wow. I think the purpose of life is to be of service to other people and to make sure we don't get so wrapped up in ourselves that we can't be productive members of our communities.
The wooden bowls that we're talking about stand as a symbol of the choices we make, a symbol of simplicity, a symbol of nature. The story they tell and what they represent is most of why I dedicate so much of my life doing it.
Oftentimes, the achievements of people are like sandcastles. They are created, and along comes the tide, and they are washed away. And it is beneficial for those coming along afterwards to see what those accomplishments were and hopefully be inspired to go even further.
I remember before my mom passed away, I was just starting to do this more professionally, and the idea of where she can see me now, she would be so proud. I can see her like literally smiling and just being like, yay, good job, like that's my daughter.
My purpose with music is to keep my tradition and culture alive, to make sure that any Yupik person out there who wants to learn the language or who wants to listen to Yupik music is able to.
So that tagline, real human stories, was far before we were really in earnest talking about artificial intelligence, but really captured what I wanted to do at the time, what I felt like people wanted to see, especially at that time, when we felt like there was a lack of maybe personal connection over the pandemic. But what I found was there are a lot of these stories out there, literally an infinite amount, and two, people are more than happy and willing to tell them. And so, and realize there is an audience for this as well. One real significant piece, a lot of the early ones were just short pieces, but I did the biggest one that I did early on was on the Yupik singer Byron Nikolai, who's essentially, this turned into about a 20-ish minute short documentary It won an award at the Anchorage Film Festival in 2022, I believe. And essentially, Byron Nicolai was a singer who lived in Anchorage. He's from Tooksuk Bay. He grew up playing music. He made an album during COVID in his apartment, and that album is in his native language, native Yupik language, and it reached #2 in the world genre of music on Apple iTunes. And he wanted to bring that music back home to his community, Tooksuk Bay. And so I said, can I come with you? This is an independently funded, I got a mileage ticket out there and went along with Byron as he brought this music back. There was one other camera there, but this was a moment in time I didn't feel like I wanted to let go without it being documented in some way. And it turned into a phenomenal story about acceptance. Byron coming back home to be accepted by his community, have his contemporary style music accepted by a more traditional community. Another one that followed very quickly afterwards, these kept scaling up in complexity and size and scope, was True Colors, which focuses on 2 graduating seniors at Bartlett High School, the second most diverse public high school in the nation, and really focuses on the lessons they learn going to school in that environment of really intense diversity at a school. And we found 2 just dynamic seniors to follow, and it turned into a 38-minute short documentary. Again, that one screened at the Anchorage International Film Festival and several other places around town. I want to give a shout out to Scott Jensen, who's quietly in the back there, because again, these are independent projects, and Scott, agreed to help shoot this. Not that he had the time to do it, but had the interest in just contributing to what we both thought was an incredible story. And we followed this, basically the 2 seniors for the months leading up to the graduation. And I'll show one scene from this, one quick scene. It's when there's something called, you may know this, there's something called Ivy Day. When I was going to college, you used to get a letter in the mail for college acceptance. But on Ivy Day, students get emails to find out whether or not they got into all of their Ivy League schools, and they can kind of look at each one individually. So Umi, the valedictorian of Bartlett this year, let me into that moment with her and her mom to find out what schools she got into. And so this is just a quick clip from that documentary.
I have been making a lot of duas about it, prayers. You know how our dean teaches us, you want one thing, if it is not good for you, it's not. So my dua for you is for you to get to this school where, you'll be successful, you'll be healthy, you'll be happy. Yeah, you're gonna be away from your comfort zone. So wherever you go, I want you to be happy. Undergrad is 4 years, so you just can't go and leave. So once you're there, you're there. It's not going to be a smooth ride. So yeah, but we can go ahead and open it one at a time.
Okay, this is the one that I've been wanting. Oh my gosh, okay, let me take a deep breath.
That's okay, that's okay. It's okay.
I have to brace myself. I feel like I'm gonna open it and then be like, we regret to inform you.
Yeah, if it is, just hope for the best. If it doesn't happen, that's okay.
Yeah, I did not get in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Wherever you go, you have to be happy. Your happiness counts. Because wherever you go, if you're happy, I'll be happy.
Oh, if this is for me, please lead me to one of these schools that I want.
I got into Dartmouth. Okay. Ivy League. Okay. Okay. I got it. Okay.
Happy to report Umi is now a thriving sophomore at Dartmouth. But stories are about relationships too, right? That was one of the first things I shot with Umi and her mom. I had met them, I had gone to their house, I sat down and talked with them. They felt comfortable inviting me into that moment, and I have to tell you, just behind the scenes, I was stressing a lot during that. I'm there by myself shooting this scene that I know an important moment is going to happen at some point in time. You could hear a little hiss and interference in my wireless microphone that was popping and having all sorts of technical problems. And I was trying to stay out of it too. I didn't want to be a distraction. I didn't want to be in there while I wanted to be an observer, not a participant in this private moment. And so fortunately, I kept enough space and was able to get in the right spot for that kind of key moment of her opening that particular email. But it was a very emotional scene for them and a very difficult thing to document, although when it plays out, it looks like a sort of a simple, very, very simplistic scene. But again, I want to check in on technology at every point here. Again, this is just a digital, workflow. I had sourced a camera that was high enough quality, 4K at this point, without breaking the bank, and was good enough to capture these moments. And so technology I would not be able to do this, as many others would not be able to do this type of work without the advancement of technology. So we're continuing that story as well here. I want to share just one more piece from Greatland Studios. Again, these projects just have continued to scale up in scope and size and complexity. Another one, this was actually a slightly different model. It was done in partnership with the Alaska Native Heritage Center. A year ago, they raised a totem pole for a very specific purpose. And I brought this idea to them of documenting that process of creating the totem pole and telling the story behind it. And this hasn't really been released yet. It's about a 22-minute short documentary it will play. It's been selected for the Anchorage Film Festival in December. But I'll show the short minute-and-a-half trailer for it here.
One summer, I attended a gathering, and the topic was boarding school children. I said, you started a conversation. It made sense that a totem pole would tell the story.
We're gonna try to carve a totem pole that represents all of them. Everything we do is trying to keep on track with what our ancestors laid out. We need to make sure that we uphold the level of art that they're trying to push 200 years ago.
In order to get healing, you need to know what you're healing from. And that only comes from truth.
My grandmother, at 7 years old, being shipped to Carlisle. She was raised in Carlisle.
It is our responsibility to understand what happened to our people, because at the end of the day, we have a right to know.
The totem pole will honor all of the boarding school children. It will be a very healing time for a lot of our people.
We have tens of thousands of years of ancestors that are behind us, leading the way.
So again, an example of storytelling that's merging, really the fundamental things I learned about the craft of storytelling back in the early days at KTUU with new technologies, new tools to create a new type of work. We're a long way from Lawn Boy at this point in time, right? Digital tools are commonplace. We all have direct access to a worldwide audience through distribution platforms. It is a world for creators at this point. And I'll walk you through all of my kind of career, that journey there from the first time I really had a camera to now for two reasons. One, for young people starting out their careers today, a career in media is rarely a linear thing, right? You might be interested in being a journalist. You might be interested in being a writer or a designer or a filmmaker or an executive or communications professional. You might do a little bit of all of those things, as I've done in my career. But the core of what you need to be successful in that all comes from those fundamental communication skills, the ability to tell a story, to write well, to speak well, to have interpersonal communication, to be able to understand concepts of design and visual storytelling. I don't think that changes with artificial intelligence, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I think that only becomes more important with artificial intelligence. The second reason I walk you through all of that again is to talk about the technology, the evolution of the technology of the last 25 years and how that's changed. We all know that because we lived it. But when you look at it really, step back at the big picture and you look at media from that lens, it really is rapid acceleration in the last 25 years. And I think that will continue. I believe that in 25 years from now, there'll be an Atwood chair standing here talking about how technology has opened doors for them in their career in a different way than mine has, in an advanced and sort of iterative way. So I think that as we stand on the edge of artificial intelligence, we all have a lot of questions about what that means, right? Computer systems now are being built to replicate human tasks, problem solving, natural language processing, translation, all sorts of things that we're only just learning about, generative, imagery. And we're only now just coming to grips and having a lot of questions about what that means, right? So how do we make sense of that? How do we make stories that matter in that landscape when the content really becomes a commodity in that sense, if there's so many ways to generate it? And as I think about the role of Atwood Chair, I want to use my time in teaching to help people understand how to approach this ethically and responsibly, right? When technology comes about, it creates opportunity and it requires responsibility, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But really, to not be fearful of the oncoming technology, but to look for ways for it to unlock how you achieve what you want to achieve. I boil it down into kind of we communications types we shy away from math generally, but I can put this equation together and understand it. Really, it's always been about the craftsperson and their craft, right? What unique human attributes do you bring to your craft? What is that chosen craft? Whether you're a writer or a designer or a filmmaker or a strategic communications professional, or you work in some other industry, but you just happen to have an element of it that requires communication, right? There's no accident that all of the, some of the top leaders in the world are also some of the best storytellers and communicators. So, you take the craftsperson plus their craft, and technology becomes the amplifier for that, right? We don't start with the technology. The technology is the amplifier for what we can already do and achieve. Or at least I believe that's the best approach to it. Because people are, at their core, storytellers, right? There is no purpose for storytelling without people. It's how we understand the world. It's fundamentally a human attribute, right? We're getting to the point where computer systems can do this, but computer systems and artificial intelligence, it doesn't need stories. Humans need stories. There's a few reasons that we do, right? Our brains are built for pattern recognition. Right? We make sense out of what otherwise might be perceived as chaos through the stories we create. We are very frustrated by an incomplete pattern. Right? We see this at the end of every Netflix show that we watch, where it teases us to the next one, or the true crime craze, which kind of makes us want to solve the mystery, or just having a sense of justice, or just wanting a conflict resolved. Not just in stories we see on TV, but in life. We tell stories and we create stories about everything in our lives. And part of that comes back to pattern recognition. We're just built for it. Social connection. That's another part of why we need stories as people, right? Comparative reasoning. We want to see how our experiences stack up against other people's experiences in life. We want to compare and share what that means. How many of us were here for the 2018 earthquake, that huge November earthquake that we all remember, right? What did we do in the weeks and months right after that earthquake? We told each other our story over and over again. Where were you? What happened? What was your experience like? That was a form of storytelling as healing, right? It showed us how we could connect socially. But that's what we do every single day. If you go and sit in any coffee shop in town, you'll hear examples of this, right? Storytelling is a form of social connection. Knowledge sharing. We're standing here on Dena'ina land, and Alaska Native people have a beautiful tradition of oral storytelling and sharing traditional practices through storytelling. You know, I saw an article recently that the 51,000 years ago in Indonesia, they've now dated the earliest form of visual storytelling in a cave drawing, 51,000 years ago. So think about our drive to tell stories as people, you know, is relentless. Look at the infrastructure we've created to allow us to tell stories. This is an illustration of the first printing press being created in the 1400s, right? Think of what it would have taken to accomplish this, to put all of these pieces together. The drive for people to tell stories is relentless. And, you know, I boil it down to a simple phrase: is if you want something to be remembered, make it a story. And, you know, that drive for people to tell stories and be connected to storytelling simply cannot be replaced or taken away by computer systems or technology. So I want us to think about that because, truthfully, as I mentioned, without people, there is no point to storytelling. It is intrinsically ours and our way of thinking and communicating. This is, of course, given away as this technology has increased to the creator economy where everyone has the potential to be their own brand. Everyone is a content creator. Young people today growing up in the digital age are natural content creators. They've been growing up doing it, you know, for as long as they could talk. They've been content creators. They didn't have to source a VHS camera from their dad and figure out how to work it in their basement, you know. And so we're continuing to be relentless storytellers. The pace of innovation, of course, has really scaled up in the last 25 years. This is, in a lot of ways, driven by something called Moore's Law. That's what that graph depicts, where the computing speeds double approximately every 2 years. Number of transistors that can fit on a chip doubles every 2 years. And think about how fast things have gotten in the last 20 years, right? Data transfers, Wi-Fi, you know, computing capacity and the complexity of algorithms. It's all driven by computing speeds. And that will continue, although Moore's Law is going to reach critical mass at some point because they can only get so many transistors on a chip at some point. But of course, they're finding new ways to make those as well. I mean, AI, the chips that run AI are quite complex. But this pace, it's no surprise that the last 25 years have been remarkably, you know, innovative and changed drastically how we communicate. And I think that acceleration will continue essentially. So how do we think about storytelling in the age of where computers become much more prominent maybe than they have been, and artificial intelligence becomes much more prominent? I don't have time to show this clip. This is Kurt Vonnegut. Maybe some of you know who he is. Celebrated writer and innovative storyteller. He has this great video where he graphs different types of stories, rags to riches, hero's journey, Cinderella story. He draws them all out in charts and graphs, and he says, these can easily be fed into a computer. Decades ago, he said this. This is not a new video. This is, I believe, late 90s, early 2000s when he did this lecture. So if stories can be fed into computers and quite easily be understood as algorithms, you know, what does that mean for artificial intelligence? What is our role in that? You know, a lot of us already are starting to hear about the ways in which, you know, we're seeing artificial intelligence at play. You know, we're seeing, you know, writing and language processing. How many people use ChatGPT or similar product there? Generative image creation, you know, image manipulation. This is starting to be built into software, generative work like this. So voice replication is another one. You can feed your voice into AI and it can then use your voice to say any script. Imagine reporters in a newsroom just writing out a script and not actually having to go to a voice booth to record it, just feed it into their AI avatar and it tells the story. Music generation, AI can make music. Task management, replicating mundane tasks, parts of the production process that are sort of laborious and we have to repeat over and over again. AI editing and post-production, this is coming. There's ideas out there about how this will work, and there's certain small companies that are trying to do this. But there's all sorts of tools. We're in the very early stages of this, the idea stage, the let's see what will stick stage. And there's a lot of risks and a lot of questions with it, right? Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who runs ChatGPT, said that AI will lead to the first billion-dollar company that's run by one person and one person only. The rest of the company is AI tools and digital clones. Now, I don't know what his time frame is on that, but that's an interesting prospect. You may look at it as a risk, because what does that do to jobs? You may look at that as an opportunity, because there's a lot of solo entrepreneurs and individuals out there that would love to have a support system around them. So there's different ways of looking at what the risks might be for that, what the opportunities might be for that. I want to share just sort of on the extreme end of things, I think, but this is an idea that's out there. What one particular group that's looking at an all AI-generated news product. This is just a short sort of glimpse at a much longer video, but I just cut out a quick little segment of it, so we'll watch that here.
The video he posted a few months ago, a news program produced entirely by artificial intelligence, quickly went viral.
Hello, and welcome to Channel One, a new way of consuming, reporting, and thinking about the news powered by artificial intelligence. All presented by our team of AI-generated reporters.
We think there's an opportunity to really bring news a few generations forward.
Adam Mossam is a Canadian engineer and investor who's lived in California for the past 20 years. Given the challenges news channels currently face, declining viewership coupled with the confidence crisis, he's convinced that the solution lies in news programs tailored to each viewer.
This is Channel One.
Military operations against Hamas by Israeli Defense Forces continue in Gaza, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
We believe personalization is the key to unlocking the next level of user experience in news. This has never been done before. And with new advances in technology, that opportunity, we believe, does exist. So we're trying to figure out if we can go and take advantage of that.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky urged his nation's people to stay focused and strong in the face of the protracted war with Russia. Zelensky's comments come as the U.S. Congress disagrees over passing a new aid package.
We have reporters that don't exist. We've created these people from scratch, and that technology has never existed before today.
It's pretty startling when you see it. I don't know, is that something people will watch? Is that something you would trust? An AI-generated newscast? Hard to say, right? Hard to say today. I suspect there'd be very little trust in it, but a decade from now, who knows what that might look like. I started exploring AI-generated tools online. This video actually will play, it looks like here. And I put two-sentence prompt into this AI tool company called Synthesia, and I read a script into it, and it made a digital avatar for me, and it created a 2-minute summary of this talk, essentially all AI generated. I'll play just a little minute of it here. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but this is not my voice. I did not read the script. I did not say this into a camera, and I did not write this either or create the design for it. This was all AI generated.
Welcome to our video on the power of storytelling in the age of artificial intelligence. Today, we'll explore how people-driven narratives remain crucial, even as technology transforms content creation and distribution across various platforms. Storytelling has always been a fundamental part of human culture, connecting us through shared experiences. In today's digital world, it's essential to maintain this human touch, ensuring stories resonate deeply with audiences despite technological advancements.
So you get the gist of it there. Not great, not perfect. I mean, you can tell it's not a real person. But again, a decade from now, 5 years, 2 years from now, what will that look like? Will your UA professors be taking a week and leaving their class with their avatar teaching a course or two? There's digital courses online have been a big trend for a long time. Will that allow people to scale those? Interesting technology. Again, will you trust it? Would you want to at least even know that that's what you're watching? So it poses some interesting questions, but that was created in less than the avatar took a day to create. You had to read a script, and then the next day you got your avatar, but the video itself was created in minutes. So interesting. We're certainly on the front edge of this age of artificial intelligence. And I go back to technology always creates opportunity. Right? That's been proven in the last 25 years of my career. Every technological innovation has created more opportunity. It goes back further than that. The printing press, broadcast radio, and television. These are things that did not exist before they were created, and they unlocked immense potential for storytelling for people. They launched careers, they launched professions, they launched huge companies. And I have no doubt that similar things will occur with some of the new technologies coming online. So people tend to always become more important with technology, not less important. And I know that's hard to see when you're talking about a technology that replicates what people do, but I believe that will be true with artificial intelligence as well. And I boil it down to creates opportunity, but requires responsibility. We have to approach these tools ethically. We have to approach them diligently. There's a lot of risks with artificial intelligence. We've all heard about deep fakes and creating content for people who didn't approve of it. We all have heard about AI having hallucinations and creating things that don't exist. So there's immense risks with this technology, but there's always risks with technology as it comes online. Will it replace people in the storytelling process? Very unlikely. People, because storytelling is for people. It's by people. It's about people. There is no point to storytelling without people. It's fundamentally ours. AI does not have a self for self-reflection, so to speak. I know there's, concerns over sentience and all of these sort of, we'll deal with that when it comes. But, AI doesn't have an imagination or creativity in the way that we do. So people will always be intrinsically necessary in the storytelling process. And really, again, this technology, we have to look at it as how can we make it work for us? How can we have it replicate, the tasks that do the tasks that don't involve human creativity and imagination? How can we use it to maximize human creativity and imagination? There will no doubt be disruptions. Every technology does create disruptions. That first job I told you about at KTUU, working as a studio camera operator, by the mid, 2011, 12, maybe even earlier than that, had been replaced by a robotic camera, remote-controlled cameras. There weren't no longer people pointing the cameras at the anchors, standing in the studio, absorbing all of that news that they were watching. Those were just cameras that were remote-controlled. So technology always changes things. But, I go back to the fact that it creates more opportunity than it destroys, and we have to look at it that way, I think, to thrive in that era. So as I wind down here, and we can open it up for questions, I want to go through sort of a set of principles. These are storytelling principles that guide a lot of my work, and I think are particularly, some of them are not new, but they're particularly relevant through the lens of artificial intelligence and how we can approach, how we think about telling stories in this age of artificial intelligence, right? Because when content becomes a commodity, and we don't always know where our content's coming from, we have to find ways to stand out and be unique with that content, right? So telling people-driven stories, that's kind of, where I come from in a lot of my work, is looking for stories to tell that are fundamentally about people in ways that cannot be replicated by technology, right? How can we find those people-driven stories? How can we go to the places where these stories are happening and observe and document and be there to tell them? Stories that only people can understand and that can only be, fundamentally human stories. It sounds kind of trite to say that, but, when we're talking about AI, that's sort of a reality. Every story, when you dig down into it, is about people. Every single story, even if it's about an issue that on the surface level doesn't seem like it's about people, you dig down a couple of layers and it's about people. So it's finding that layer that touches, that core of humanity there. Finding universal emotions within stories, right? Artificial intelligence, may be able to simulate our emotions, but there's nothing that you can quite, replicate about real human emotions, right? So in every story taps in to universal emotions, right? Byron Nicolai's story is about acceptance, going back home to his home community and being accepted by the people who raised him. Umi and Nico and True Colors, their story is about never giving up on your dreams. How We Rise, the totem pole story, is really about collectively healing as a community through following a shared trauma. These are all fundamental emotions that we can understand, we can apply to our own lives. And every single story has universal emotions within it. And so pulling those threads, finding where those are, and drawing those out as themes makes our work more personal, more authentic, more human. Building with natural moments. I have to give Scott Jensen another shout out with this because so much of his work taught me about this. And Scott was a mentor when I was a news photographer, long ago, and we worked together and had a healthy competition over storytelling, and which is a wonderful thing. And Scott taught me so much about natural moments, finding those natural moments within stories. Those natural moments really being those human interactions that reveal our wants and our needs, elements of our character, emotions. These are by definition things we cannot create. These are things we can only observe. They can be big or small. It's Umi taking a deep breath before she gets on stage to do her valedictorian speech. Or it can be 1,000 people gathering to raise a totem pole. These are everywhere. Again, you go out in public and just observe people and you see natural moments everywhere. The job of the storyteller is to find those and build stories around them, right? You understand where they fit, you position yourself to have the relationship that allows you access to those moments, and you build into them and you build out of them. How did it change people? What did people learn? How do we grow through those moments? These are things that cannot be replicated by technology. These are the human attributes that we have and always will bring to storytelling, regardless of the prevailing technology at the time. Trust and ethics. These have been important ever since they made forever, but before the printing press, and mass communications and media organizations have talked about ethics for a long time. But it's important through the lens of artificial intelligence as well, because again, if content is a commodity, don't you want to know whether your content was produced by a person or AI? Don't you want to know what that person's values were, that organization's values were? As a news organization or a content creator, be transparent about your trust and ethics. What are your boundaries? What will and won't you do as a storyteller? Those things are incredibly important because storytelling is about relationships. It's about wanting to know that who you're getting information from, has done the work to verify and vet that information, that it's authentic. And I think that's a lot of what's behind the distrust of AI-generated content, because it's hard to trust, something you don't really know how it came to that. It's a little bit of mystery around how some of the content is generated. So trust and ethics. Ethics are freedom, right? Ethics give us, you don't have to question where you stand when you have ethics. So you just know your ethics, what you will and you won't do as a content creator. Make sure your audience is clear on that as well. That's more important now than perhaps ever before, although it's always been very important. Of course, we're talking about technology, amplifying with technology. We have to work as this new technology comes online for it to ethically and responsibly fit into how we tell stories, right? The technology has to work for us, not the other way around. But we can amplify with technology. There's a lot of wonderful use cases for AI that are already emerging. And again, I have no doubt that 25 years from now, people who are starting their career, if they're willing to adapt and learn and understand the technologies that come along, that have these, incredible, mind-blowing capabilities, they're going to have a career path that carries them places, through technology and through bringing their own personal craft to it. So how do we amplify with technology? We can use technology to take care of a lot of the mundane tasks, a lot of the sort of labor-intensive tasks, so that we can maximize human creativity and imagination, right? I would love to hear about news organizations doing that right now. How can they use these technologies to take some of the daily legwork out so that they can focus all of their people on the creativity and imagination behind telling better stories. So there is a path forward, and an organization will get that balance right, and I think the ones that will thrive in the future will be the ones who get that balance of humanity and technology right. But amplifying with technology is I think, the key way to move forward here. Continually learning. You have to be able to adapt to these new technologies. There is a healthy amount of fear you can have with being cautious about new technologies. But had I stuck with VHS cameras, we would be in a bad place, I think. You have to embrace them, and you have to continually learn and adapt. It's again that sort of fundamental, the craftsperson in their craft, and finding the ways to let technology unlock that. So, those core communication skills, as I mentioned in the beginning, can carry you through different industries, different disciplines, but they don't get, less important with technology. They get more important. Even though ChatGPT can put out a reasonably good first draft, there still needs to be a person involved in that process, carrying that into a final draft, putting a sense of humanity to it, and making that into something that people want to see. Continuing to level up, so to speak. This is a slightly different one we may not always think about, but voting with your attention. Right? Every day when we go on our phones and we get online, we're voting for the type of content we want to see in the world. The algorithms will produce more of what you click on, more of what you spend your time on. Where is your attention? Is that on what you want to see in the world? Is it being distracted by some more questionable types of content that are easy to be swayed by? Are there news sources that you subscribe to? Are there monthly subscriptions that you pay for various things? Where is your attention? Because that is essentially rewarding the type of content you want to see in the world. So something to be mindful of, particularly in an environment for artificial intelligence, where we're going to have to know what type of content we're looking at once AI becomes capable of generating. Had you seen that news video, AI-driven video, that we cannot potentially tell the difference between that and a human. So we'll have to know. We'll have to be very vigilant about how we spend our attention. So there's I just went through a couple of those as I close out here. I want to go back to technology creates opportunity and requires responsibility, right? Those are the two most fundamental takeaways from my 20 plus year career. And I think, as I mentioned, 25 years from now, there will be an Atwood chair standing here saying, I hope a similar thing, but we won't yet know what technology they're talking about. And it always comes back to, my very complex math equation of, craftsperson, creator, plus craft, amplified by technology is how we make impact. The question then is, how do we come to understand the nuances of craft? And if you're a student, if you're learning, if you have ambition to become a storyteller, you have to learn that craft. So how do we approach that? You could take my class next semester and we'll dive into that a little bit, but we won't push that too hard right now. But that's one of the things we'll be getting into next in the spring, and one of the classes that I'm teaching is that craft of storytelling, how we create that work of people-driven storytelling. So I want to close with a concept that I think is pretty interesting and pretty appropriate these days. Has anybody ever heard of this concept? Greek concept of time? Chronos and Kairos. When I was an undergraduate years ago, somebody talked about this at one of the graduation speeches, and it always stuck with me, these two words. And occasionally I'll look it up and relearn it. Chronos is this idea of time in two phases, right? Chronos is chronological time, if you can imagine. It's the minutes and days and weeks that we measure time. It's the mundane tasks that we do every day. It's the brushing your teeth, walking out to the car, the various things we do to just live life every day and have to get by. Kairos, on the other hand, is a little bit different. We think about time in the moments and memories that we create. It's when you go on vacation and you come back and you tell a friend of yours that spontaneous day you had where you just went in a completely different direction, or that person you met that is now a lifelong friend, or it's that moment you walked down the aisle for your wedding, or when you had a child, or that job you got. Those memories that we create that burn into us vividly, they bring us back to a place in time when we think of them. They're what make up our humanity, right? They're the things that give us purpose, that we want to take with us and keep with us. That's where storytelling lives, in that time. Right, we can let AI and a lot of the technology live in Chronos time. It can take care of the labor-intensive things. It can take care of the mundane things. It can bleed over into Kairos time a little bit, but that's ours. That's where we create the stories and the moments that shape our lives. And that's where we can mine within our own lives and within other people's lives and experiences the stories we want to tell, and the stories I hope to see you all tell and hope many more people tell through work they do in the future. So that's what I have. Again, I'm Brad Hillwig, Atwood Chair for 24-25, Director of Lawn Boy and other films. And most everything I do, I try to educate, inspire, and sometimes entertain. And hopefully I've done at least one or part of one of those things tonight. But I think we have some time for questions, answers, conversations. I'm curious to hear your views on some of these. I've been talking a lot tonight. So thank you.